I stared at the empty closet where his clothes had been just this morning. His text message still glowing on my phone. I need someone with more ambition. My bank account drained from paying his $60,000 debt, his freedom apparently worth exactly that price. I stared at the screen of my laptop, my hand trembling slightly as I hit submit on the final payment. After 3 years of carefully budgeted transfers, extra hours at work, and deferred dreams of my own, I had finally done it. The $87,000 of student debt that had been crushing Ryan was gone. I closed my laptop with a satisfying click and glanced at the small velvet box I'd wrapped for him, a pair of cufflinks he'd admired months ago. My small celebratory gift to mark the occasion. Tonight would be perfect. I'd made reservations at Montello's, the restaurant where we'd had our first date, and then I would show him the receipt, the evidence that he was finally free of the burden he'd carried since graduate school. Ryan arrived at my apartment looking unusually polished. New haircut, crisp button-down I hadn't seen before, a strange nervousness in his movements. "You look nice," I said, kissing him hello. "Special occasion?" He gave a tight smile. "Something like that." At the restaurant, I practically buzzed with excitement through appetizers, waiting for the perfect moment to share my news. Ryan seemed distracted, checking his watch, his phone, his gaze drifting to the entrance occasionally. "Everything okay?" I asked as our entrees arrived. "Yeah, fine." He took a sip of his wine. "Actually, Serena, there's something I need to tell you." The seriousness in his tone made me pause, fork halfway to my mouth. "What is it?" He set down his glass, carefully aligning it with the water tumbler. "This isn't working for me anymore." "Us. I think we should end things." The words hung in the air between us, nonsensical, like he had suddenly started speaking a language I didn't understand. "What?" I managed finally. "Ryan, what are you talking about?" "Things have been good. We just talked about looking at apartments together last week." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I've been thinking about this for a while. We want different things. We're on different trajectories." "Different trajectories," I repeated, the phrase oddly formal, rehearsed. "What does that even mean?" He sighed, finally looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not sadness, not regret, something more like impatience. "I need someone with more, Serena. More ambition, more connections, more possibilities. More." The word echoed in my head as I thought of the 3 years I had spent helping him pay down his debt. The promotions I'd passed up because they would have meant relocating away from his job. The careful budgeting, the side gig I'd taken on editing marketing copy on weekends, the vacation fund I'd emptied last summer when his car needed repairs. "I see," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "And when did you decide this?" He shifted uncomfortably. "It's been building for a while." "How long is a while, Ryan?" He glanced at his watch again. "Look, I don't think the timeline matters. The point is, I've made my decision. I think it's better to make a clean break." Something in his demeanor, the new clothes, the nervousness, the repeated glances toward the entrance, suddenly clicked into place. "You're meeting someone here," I said. Not a question. A flush crept up his neck. "Serena, who is she?" He sighed again, that same impatient sound. "Her name is Madison. I met her at the Hanover project planning meeting. Her father is on the development board." "How long?" "We're not having this conversation here." "How long?" My voice remained quiet, controlled, though something was building inside me, not just pain, but a cold, clear clarity that cut through the shock. 2 months, he admitted finally. "But nothing happened until when, Ryan?" "Until today? Yesterday? Last week?" I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app, and turned the screen toward him. "I made the final payment on your student loans this morning. $87,000. Paid in full." His eyes widened, genuine surprise breaking through his rehearsed composure. "You, what?" 3 years, I said, my voice still eerily calm. 3 years of helping you make payments, taking on extra work, putting my own financial goals on hold. And today, I made the final payment." He stared at the screen, then at me, momentarily speechless. "I didn't ask you to do that." "No. You just accepted it. Month after month." A young woman approached our table then, tall, polished, wearing the kind of casually expensive clothes that signal old money. She slowed, clearly recognizing Ryan, confusion crossing her features as she registered my presence. Madison, Ryan stood quickly. I thought we were meeting at the bar. They said you were already seated, she replied, her eyes moving between us. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. It's fine. Ryan turned to me, lowering his voice. Serena, I'm sorry things ended this way. I'll get my things from your place tomorrow. I looked at Madison, who was still standing there awkwardly, then back at Ryan. No need, I said, standing and gathering my purse. I'll pack them for you. Text me when you want to pick them up. Serena, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, my legs somehow carrying me despite the numbness spreading through my body. I nodded politely to the hostess, stepped into the cool evening air, and managed to make it half a block before the tears came. I, in the safety of a rideshare heading home, I pulled out my phone and looked again at the confirmation screen. $87,000. The equivalent of a down payment on a house. More than 2 years of my salary. Gone. My hands shook as I scrolled through my recent photos, stopping on one from just last week, Ryan and me at his company party, his arm around my waist, both of us smiling. While he was already seeing Madison. While he was already planning to leave, I closed the app and stared out the window at the passing city lights. The initial wave of shock and pain was still there, but something else was emerging beneath it, a cold, clear purpose. Ryan thought he needed someone with more. Someone with more connections, more status, more wealth. He'd taken what I had to offer, then discarded me when a more advantageous option appeared. What he didn't realize was that he had just made the most expensive mistake of his life. By the time the car pulled up to my apartment building, my tears had dried. I tipped the driver, walked inside, and began making a list. The morning after Ryan's bombshell, I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, spreadsheets arranged in neat tabs. Coffee grew cold beside me as I methodically documented 3 years of financial entanglement. 3 years. 36 months of carefully tracking Ryan's loan payments, credit card debt, and the temporary support that had somehow become permanent. I had believed we were building a future together, that his debt was our debt, his success our success. What a fool I had been. The numbers told a story far more damning than Ryan's casual dismissal at dinner. Student loan payments, $52,480. Credit card debt elimination, $15,750. His half of rent I'd covered during his career transition, $11,400. Car repairs, professional development courses, even the tailored suit he'd needed for the interview at his current firm, all paid from my savings, my overtime, my sacrifices. Grand total, $87. 193.42. I created a separate spreadsheet for what Ryan had contributed to my life financially during the same period. The list was short. My birthday dinners, occasional grocery runs, his portion of rent when he was employed. Less than $15,000 over 3 years. The imbalance was staggering. Not because the money itself mattered, I had given it freely, believing in our partnership, but because of what it revealed about the fundamental inequity of our relationship. I had been investing in us. Ryan had been investing in himself. My phone buzzed with a text from Priya. Coffee? You sounded rough last night. I had called her from the rideshare, barely coherent through tears. Priya, with her financial analyst's mind and unwavering loyalty, was exactly who I needed right now. An hour later, we sat in a quiet corner of her favorite cafe, my spreadsheets pulled up on my tablet. Jesus, Serena, Priya said, scrolling through the numbers. I knew you were helping him, but this is insane. I supplied. Pathetic? The actions of someone with catastrophically poor judgment. I was going to say substantial, she replied, her tone gentler than her usual bluntness. But yes, it's a significant amount of money. Do you have any documentation? Agreements, texts where he acknowledges these were loans rather than gifts. I swiped to another folder. Some. Not for everything. We never made a formal agreement. It was all just understood, or so I thought. Priya, Ever practical, moved straight to strategy. Legally, this won't be straightforward. Without explicit loan agreements, much of this could be considered gifts in the eyes of the law. So I have no recourse. The words felt hollow, final. I didn't say that. She tapped the screen. Look, there are patterns here. Regular payments, his acknowledgments and texts. A decent lawyer could make a case, especially for the larger amounts. You think I should sue Ryan? The idea seemed simultaneously excessive and insufficient. I think you should know your options. She set down the tablet. But first, I want to make sure you're secure. Did you have joint accounts? No, thank God. One small mercy in this disaster. Just a shared household expenses account, and I've already transferred my portion back to my personal account. Good. And he doesn't have access to your credit cards, passwords, anything like that. I shook my head. Despite my financial support, we had maintained separate financial identities, my insistence, ironically. At least I had done one thing right. What about your mutual friends? What are you going to tell them? I hadn't even considered the social fallout. Our lives were thoroughly intertwined after 3 years, shared friend group, his colleagues I'd grown close to, my coworkers who considered us a unit. The truth, I decided. Not as a smear campaign, just facts. He left me for someone else, someone with family connections that will advance his career. Priya nodded. Simple, factual, dignified. Good. She hesitated. Have you checked his social media today? No. I've been too busy calculating exactly how much of an idiot I am. She pushed her phone across the table, open to Ryan's Instagram. A new post from last night. Ryan and Madison at a rooftop bar, city lights glittering behind them. His caption, "New beginnings with this amazing woman." The timestamp was barely an hour after he'd left me sitting alone at Montello's. He's not wasting any time, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He's an ass, Priya replied. And look at the comments. I scrolled down. Congratulations from people I knew, our friends, his colleagues, even his sister Zoe. All celebrating his new relationship, unaware that ours had ended just hours before the photo was taken. Classy, I muttered. The question is, Priya said, taking back her phone, what are you going to do about it? It was the right question. Not what was I feeling, devastated, or what did I want, the last 3 years of my life back, but what was I going to do? Action. Movement forward. First, I need to understand exactly where I stand legally, I decided. I'm meeting with Marcus Gutierrez tomorrow. The contract lawyer? Good choice. Then I need to protect myself financially. Make sure Ryan can't access anything of mine, check my credit report, change all my passwords. Already on it, Priya said, pulling out her laptop. Let's do that now. We spent the next hour fortifying my financial boundaries, changing passwords, checking for any lingering automatic payments to Ryan's accounts, reviewing my credit report for any surprises. Practical steps, concrete actions that gave me a sense of control when everything else felt chaotic. As we worked, I found myself thinking not just about the money, but about the years invested, the dreams deferred, the fundamental imbalance that I had accepted as normal. Ryan's not the first person to trade up for status, Priya observed, eerily tracking my thoughts as she often did. But most people don't leave someone on the very day they've paid off a massive debt. Lucky me, I found someone special, I said dryly. His timing confirms this was calculated, Serena. He knew you were making those payments. He waited until he was debt-free before leaving. The cold clarity I had felt last night crystallized further. It was transactional for him. The whole relationship. Which means, Priya continued, her expression hardening, he owes you. Not just morally, but financially. And we're going to make sure he pays. As I left the cafe, I felt something shift within me. The initial shock and pain hadn't disappeared, but they had been joined by something stronger, a resolve that went beyond hurt feelings or wounded pride. This wasn't about winning Ryan back or punishing him for leaving. It was about justice, accountability, and the clear-eyed recognition that I deserved better than what he had taken from me. I had assessed the damage. Now it was time to prepare for what came next. Without a written agreement, Recovering the full amount will be challenging, Marcus Gutierrez said, reviewing the spreadsheets I'd organized. But not impossible. We sat in his downtown office 3 days after Ryan's abrupt exit from my life. The wall of legal books behind Marcus should have been intimidating, but instead I found them reassuring, solid, systematic, orderly. Everything my life currently was not. What exactly are my options? I asked. Several, depending on your goals, he replied, making notes on a legal pad. We could approach this as a breach of verbal contract, arguing that there was an implicit agreement to repay. The regular nature of the payments, the specific amounts tied to his debt, these suggest a structured arrangement, not casual gifts. I nodded. There were conversations. Nothing formal, but we discussed how these were temporary measures until his career stabilized. Did you keep any of those texts? Emails? Anything documenting his acknowledgement that these were loans? I pulled out my phone, opening a folder of screenshots I'd compiled. Some. He thanked me for covering him until bonus season. There's one where he specifically mentions paying me back for the car repairs. Marcus reviewed them, nodding. This helps. Not definitive, but supportive. He looked up. What's your priority here, Serena? Maximum recovery? Making a point? Minimal drama? It was a good question. I had spent the last 3 days processing my options, discussing strategies with Priya, even researching similar cases online. What did I actually want? I want what's fair, I said finally. I don't expect to get back every dollar. But I won't be treated like a financial placeholder who's served her purpose and can now be discarded. Marcus nodded, understanding. Then I suggest a demand letter as our opening move. Formal, legally precise, but not initiating court proceedings yet. Sometimes the prospect of legal action is enough to motivate settlement. And if it's not, then we escalate strategically. He leaned forward, his expression serious. But Serena, I want to be clear about something. Even with a strong case, litigation is expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining. We need to be pragmatic about our approach. Understood. I appreciated his candor. What should I be doing to strengthen our position? Document everything, he advised. Continue organizing financial records. Save any communications from Ryan, especially anything mentioning these payments or financial matters. And prepare yourself for his reaction. People rarely respond well to formal demands for repayment, even when justified. I had already begun anticipating Ryan's response, mentally gaming out scenarios. He'll be dismissive at first, then angry when he realizes I'm serious. Then he'll try to make me feel guilty for ruining what we had. Marcus raised an eyebrow, impressed by my assessment. You know him well. 3 years, I said simply. I know his playbook. After leaving Marcus's office, I headed to my apartment to continue the next phase of preparation. Ryan had texted the previous day, asking when he could collect his things. I had scheduled it for this afternoon, deliberately choosing a time when Priya could be present as both witness and support. I moved methodically through the apartment, gathering Ryan's belongings. Clothes from the closet, folded neatly into boxes. Books from the shelves. The expensive wireless headphones I'd given him last Christmas. Each item cataloged in a spreadsheet, photographed, and packed with a precision that kept me anchored when emotions threatened to overwhelm me. There wasn't as much as I had expected. 3 years together, and Ryan's physical presence in my space was surprisingly minimal. Perhaps he had been keeping his options open all along. When Priya arrived, she surveyed the organized boxes with approval. Very civilized of you. I'd have been tempted to set it all on fire. I considered it, I admitted. But this isn't about revenge. It's about resolution. The buzzer rang precisely at 3. Ryan was nothing if not punctual when it suited him. Ready? Priya asked, squeezing my shoulder, but I nodded, buzzing him up. We had prepared for this moment, discussed what I would and wouldn't say, how to maintain boundaries, what information to withhold about my legal consultation. Ryan appeared at the door carrying an empty duffel bag, clearly underestimating how much of his life was intertwined with mine. He hesitated when he saw Priya. I didn't realize you'd have company, he said, his eyes darting between us. Priya's helping me today, I replied, stepping back to let him enter. Your things are boxed up. I've made an inventory list so we can confirm everything's accounted for. He looked taken aback by the businesslike approach. Serena, we don't need to make this so formal. I thought we could talk. The boxes are in the living room, I continued as if he hadn't spoken. Anything missing from the inventory, let me know. Ryan glanced at the neatly organized boxes, then back at me. This feels unnecessary. We were together for 3 years. Can't we at least have a conversation like adults? What would you like to discuss? I kept my voice neutral, giving nothing away. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. Look, I know the timing was bad. I handled it poorly, but I hope we can be civil about this. I'm being perfectly civil, I pointed out. I've packed your belongings, made an inventory, and arranged for you to collect them. What would be more civil than that? Priya remained silent, but watchful, her presence a buffer against the emotional manipulation I had anticipated. Ryan sighed, adopting the slightly pained expression he used when he felt misunderstood. About the loan payments. I know you mentioned it at dinner. I didn't realize you'd made the final payment. That was incredibly generous. This was it, the opening I had prepared for. I could demand repayment now, initiate the confrontation that would eventually lead to legal action. But Marcus had advised restraint, a strategic approach rather than an emotional one. Yes, it was, I agreed simply. The inventory list is on the coffee table. I'll need your keys when you're done. Frustration flashed across his face. He wasn't getting the emotional reaction he'd expected, not tears, not anger, not an opportunity to position himself as the reasonable party while I played the hysterical ex. Fine, he said finally, moving toward the boxes. Let's do this your way. For the next 20 minutes, Ryan checked the inventory, occasionally asking about specific items. I answered factually without elaboration. Priya remained a silent, steady presence, her gaze cool whenever Ryan looked her way. When he had verified everything, he handed me his keys. I guess that's it then. Not quite, I said, retrieving an envelope from the side table. This is for you. Please don't open it until you leave. He took the envelope, confusion evident in his expression. Serena, I don't understand what's happening here. This isn't like you. You'd be surprised, I replied. Goodbye, Ryan. After he left, Priya turned to me. What was in the envelope? A letter from me. No legal language, no demands. Just a clear account of what I contributed financially to his life, and what that support made possible for him. I sat down, suddenly exhausted. And a request that he reflect on what kind of person takes that level of support and walks away without a backward glance. Priya raised an eyebrow. You're softening him up before the legal demand letter. I'm giving him one chance to do the right thing on his own, I corrected. Before we escalate. She nodded slowly. Calculated but fair. Very you. The next phase of preparation was more personal. I met with my bank to discuss financial recovery strategies. I updated my budget to account for the significant loss of savings. I spoke with my supervisor about taking on additional projects, not out of desperation, but to accelerate rebuilding my financial cushion. Each practical step helped quiet the voice that still sometimes whispered in the dark. You weren't enough. You were just a convenient solution until something better came along. 1 week after Ryan collected his things, Marcus called. We're ready to move forward with the demand letter. I need your final approval on the amount and terms. We had settled on seeking repayment of $65,000, not the full amount I had contributed, but the portion most clearly tied to debt elimination rather than general support. The letter outlined a payment plan spanning 2 years, with modest interest. Send it, I authorized. And Marcus? Thank you. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, a strange calm settling over me. In just 10 days, I had moved from devastating shock to clear-eyed purpose. The pain hadn't disappeared, it still ambushed me at unexpected moments, memories surfacing like shrapnel working its way out of a wound. But with each day, each concrete action, each deliberate choice, I was reclaiming more than just financial assets. I was reclaiming my sense of self-worth, my agency, my future. Ryan had said he needed someone with more. What he would soon discover was that I had been holding back the most valuable thing of all, my unwavering conviction that I deserved better than what he had offered. The demand letter would arrive at Ryan's apartment tomorrow. The real confrontation was about to begin. The call came 3 days after the demand letter was delivered, Ryan's name flashing on my screen like a warning. I had been expecting it, had rehearsed this conversation mentally a dozen times. Still, my hand trembled slightly as I answered. "Are you serious with this?" His voice was tight, controlled anger vibrating beneath the surface. "A legal letter demanding $65,000? "Hello, Ryan," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Yes, I'm entirely serious. This is ridiculous. You can't possibly expect me to pay you for money you chose to give me while we were together." "I didn't give you money, Ryan. I helped you pay off specific debts with the understanding that we were building a future together." I kept my voice steady, factual. "A future you abruptly ended the moment the financial burden was lifted. That's not fair. I ended things because we weren't compatible, not because of money." Interesting timing then. I allowed a hint of skepticism to enter my voice. 3 years together, and you discovered our incompatibility on the exact day I made the final payment on your student loans. A pause. "Look, I know you're hurt. This isn't about hurt feelings," I interrupted. "This is about financial accountability. You accepted significant financial support under the premise of a shared future, then immediately pivoted to a relationship that offers you social and professional advantages. So that's what this is? You're jealous of Madison." Classic deflection, making it about emotions rather than actions. I had anticipated this exact strategy. "My feelings about Madison are irrelevant," I replied. "The letter outlines your options clearly. If you'd like to propose an alternative payment plan, I'm open to discussion. Otherwise, the terms as written stand." "Serena, be reasonable. You know I don't have that kind of money." "You didn't have that kind of money. Now you do, because I paid your debts." Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted to the persuasive tone he used in professional negotiations. "Look, I acknowledge that you are incredibly supportive financially. I appreciate everything you did. But these were gifts in the context of our relationship, not loans." "The documentation suggests otherwise," I said. "Your texts specifically mention paying me back and covering until bonus season. You're really going to use casual conversation as a contract." Disbelief colored his voice. "This isn't going to hold up legally, and you know it. Are you willing to test that theory in court?" I kept my voice calm. "Because I am." The threat of public proceedings seemed to register. Ryan's career at his prestigious architecture firm depended heavily on his reputation and connections he was cultivating through Madison and her family. "I can't believe you're doing this," he said finally. "This isn't like you, Serena." "You'd be surprised," I replied, echoing the words I'd used when he collected his things. "The fact is, Ryan, you benefited enormously from my financial support. I'm not asking for everything back. I'm asking for acknowledgement of that benefit through partial repayment. And if I refuse, then Marcus Gutierrez will proceed with legal action. I'd prefer to avoid that, but I'm prepared if necessary." Silence stretched between us. I could almost hear him calculating, weighing options, searching for an angle that would advantage him. "I need time to think about this," he said finally. "You have 7 days to respond, as outlined in the letter." "Serena," his voice softened, became intimate, the tone he used when he wanted something. "We had 3 good years together. Do you really want it to end like this? With lawyers and demands?" I closed my eyes briefly. Once, that voice would have swayed me, made me doubt myself. Not anymore. "I didn't choose this ending, Ryan. You did. I'm simply addressing the financial aftermath." After we hung up, I took a moment to steady myself, then texted Priya. First contact made. When exactly as predicted, her response was immediate. Of course it did. "You're 3 steps ahead of him." Ryan's next move came sooner than I expected. That evening, my doorbell rang. When I checked the security camera, I saw him standing in the hallway, hands in pockets, expression contrite. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called through the intercom. Any response to the demand letter should go through Marcus. "I'm not here about the letter," he replied. "I just want to talk. Face to face. We've already talked. Please, Serena. 5 minutes." I considered my options. Refusing to engage could push him toward a legal response. A brief conversation might reveal his strategy, and I was no longer vulnerable to his emotional manipulation. 5 minutes, I agreed. In the lobby, not my apartment. When I met him in the building's lobby, Ryan looked different, less polished than when he'd collected his things, shadows under his eyes suggesting stress or sleepless nights. Good. Thank you for seeing me, he began. I've been thinking about what you said. About the timing. I waited, saying nothing. It looks bad, I know. And I'm sorry for that. But you have to understand, these feelings for Madison didn't just appear overnight. It was building for months. While you were still accepting my financial support, I noted. He winced. That's why I'm here. I want to propose a compromise. I'm listening. I can't pay $65,000. It's not realistic. But I recognize that you helped me significantly. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is a check for $15,000. It's everything I have in savings right now. I'm offering it as a good faith acknowledgement of your support. I didn't reach for the envelope. That's less than a quarter of what you received. It's all I can afford right now. His eyes met mine, sincere and earnest, the expression that had once made me believe every promise he made. Take it, Serena. Let's end this cleanly. I studied him carefully. The check was a tactic, not a genuine attempt at fairness. He was trying to establish that the money had been gifts by offering a token, gratitude, payment rather than acknowledging a legitimate debt. No, I said simply. His expression hardened. No. The terms were clearly outlined in the letter. $15,000 is insufficient. It's all I have. Then we can discuss a payment plan for the remainder. Ryan's facade of contrition vanished. You won't win this in court, you know. Any decent lawyer will argue these were gifts and they'll win. You're just wasting money on legal fees out of spite. I smiled slightly. Interesting that you mentioned court. I haven't initiated any legal proceedings yet, just sent a demand letter. You seem quite concerned about what might happen if this becomes public. He paled slightly, confirming my suspicion. This wasn't just about the money, it was about the potential damage to his carefully constructed professional image. I thought you were different, he said, voice hard now. I thought you were kind, generous, not vindictive. I am kind and generous, I replied. I'm also not a doormat. Seeking fair repayment for significant financial support isn't vindictive, Ryan. It's self-respect. Madison's father is on the board at Prescott Development, he said abruptly. He could make one call and get you a marketing position that would triple your salary. I could make that happen for you. The blatant attempt at bribery was so transparent I almost laughed. So you're offering me a job through your new girlfriend's family in exchange for dropping my legitimate financial claim? He frowned. I'm trying to find a solution that benefits everyone. No, you're trying to avoid accountability. I checked my watch. Your 5 minutes are up. Serena, any further communication should go through Marcus, I said, turning to leave. Goodbye, Ryan. As I walked back to the elevator, I heard him call after me. If you push this, I'll fight it. And it will get ugly. I didn't turn around. His threat only confirmed what I already knew. He was worried. And he should be. The next day, Eleanor Bennett called. I stared at the phone in surprise, recognizing Ryan's mother's name on the screen. We had always had a cordial but distant relationship. Holiday dinners and occasional family gatherings are only real points of contact. Serena, she began when I answered, her voice carefully neutral. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Hello, Eleanor. This is unexpected. Yes, I imagine it is. A pause. Ryan told us about your demand. Of course he had. Running to his parents had always been Ryan's fallback when facing consequences. I see, I replied, giving nothing away. He seems quite upset. Says you're asking for an unreasonable amount. Did he mention why I'm asking for repayment? Another pause. He said you helped with some expenses while you were together. Said you were now characterizing those as loans rather than gifts. So he had presented a sanitized version to his family. Predictable. Did he tell you the specific expenses I covered? I asked. Not in detail, no. I paid off his student loans, Eleanor. $87,000 over 3 years. The final payment was made the day he left me for Madison Prescott. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. "Oh," she said finally, her voice much smaller. "He didn't mention that." "I'm not surprised." "Serena, I don't know what to say. I had no idea. Most people didn't. I didn't broadcast the support I provided to Ryan. I kept my tone factual, without bitterness. I believed we were building a future together. Ryan apparently had other plans." "I see." Another long pause. "I need to discuss this with my husband. And with Ryan." "Of course." After we disconnected, I texted Marcus to update him on both conversations. His response was encouraging. Both interactions strengthen our position. The fact that he attempted a token payment constitutes acknowledgement of the debt, and his mother's reaction suggests family pressure may work in our favor. That evening, I received a text from Zoe, Ryan's sister. "Just heard what my brother did. I'm so sorry, Serena." That's beyond messed up. The confrontation was unfolding exactly as I had anticipated, not through a single dramatic showdown, but through a series of strategic interactions that steadily eroded Ryan's position. With each exchange, the narrative shifted further from vengeful ex making unreasonable demands to man who took financial support then abandoned the provider when convenient. I hadn't raised my voice once. I hadn't made a scene. I had simply stated facts, presented evidence, and refused to back down. Sometimes the most effective confrontation isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's the quiet, persistent insistence on accountability that proves most powerful, and Ryan was beginning to realize just how powerful that could be. The social impact of the confrontation spread in ripples, starting with those closest to us and expanding outward in widening circles of revelation and response. Priya had predicted this would happen once I stood my ground. "People talk," she had said, "especially when money and betrayal are involved." She was right. Within days of my conversations with Ryan and his mother, our mutual friends began reaching out, cautiously at first, then with increasing directness as the truth emerged. "I heard Ryan left you for some rich girl from his work," texted Miguel, a friend from our regular trivia group. "But now there's something about you paying his loans? What's actually going on?" I responded with simple facts. Yes, Ryan ended our relationship to pursue Madison Prescott. Yes, I had spent 3 years helping him pay off his student debt. Yes, I was seeking partial repayment of funds that were provided with the understanding of a shared future. No embellishment, no emotional appeals, just reality. Miguel's response was immediate. "That's seriously messed up. Let me know if you need anything." Similar messages followed from other friends, acquaintances, even colleagues who had known us as a couple. With each exchange, I maintained the same approach, factual, dignified, refusing to demonize Ryan while also refusing to minimize what had happened. The collective response was validating, but also unexpectedly painful. Each message of support highlighted the gap between how others saw me as someone deserving of loyalty and fairness, and how Ryan had treated me. Ryan's attempts to control the narrative proved increasingly futile. His initial story, that I was being unreasonable and vindictive after he'd simply fallen in love with someone else, crumbled as the financial details became known. His social media presence, once triumphantly showcasing his new relationship with Madison, grew quieter. The gleaming posts of rooftop cocktails and exclusive events became sporadic, then ceased entirely. 1 week after our confrontation in the lobby, Priya called with new information. "You'll never guess who I ran into at Driftwood Coffee." "Who?" "Madison Prescott herself." Priya sounded both amused and triumphant. "Apparently, she works remotely from there sometimes. She recognized me from Ryan's place when you were packing his things." My pulse quickened. "What happened?" "She approached me, asked if we could talk. She wanted to know if it was true, about the loans, the timing, all of it." "And you told her?" "Only what's already common knowledge." "But Serena," she looked shaken. I don't think Ryan had given her the full story. This was an unexpected development. I had assumed Madison was complicit, or at least indifferent to the circumstances of her relationship with Ryan. The idea that she might be questioning things shifted my understanding of the situation. Has Ryan reached out to you since your lobby confrontation? Priya asked. No. But Marcus heard from his lawyer yesterday, some junior associate trying to argue that the financial support constituted gifts rather than loans. I smiled slightly. Marcus shut that down pretty quickly with the evidence we've compiled. So he's trying the legal route now. Trying and failing, I confirmed. Marcus says his position is weak, especially with the text evidence we have. The professional fallout was becoming evident as well. Ryan's architecture firm specialized in high-end residential and commercial projects, relying heavily on reputation and connections. The kind of clients they courted would not be impressed by someone who took financial support from a partner and then abandoned them immediately after the debt was cleared. 3 days later, Zoe called me directly, something she had never done before. We had always been friendly at family gatherings, but our relationship existed primarily through Ryan. I needed to tell you this myself, she said after our initial awkward greeting. Ryan's been suspended at work. What? Why? Apparently one of the senior partners heard about what happened between you two from a client whose wife is friends with Madison. They're concerned about his judgment and character, especially since he works with their most valuable clients. She paused. He's staying at our parents' house now. Madison asked for space to think. I absorbed this information in silence. I hadn't anticipated such swift professional consequences, hadn't factored Madison's potential disillusionment into my calculations. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad, Zoe continued, misinterpreting my silence. He brought this on himself. I just thought you should know. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. How are your parents handling it? Mom's been incredibly quiet since she talked to you. Dad is processing. They're both pretty shocked by the whole thing. None of us knew you were the one paying off his loans. He always made it sound like he was handling everything himself. Of course he had. Ryan had constructed a careful facade of self-sufficiency, presenting his career progress as the result of his talent and hard work rather than the freedom provided by my financial support. The conversation with Zoe marked a turning point in the fallout. What had begun as a private financial dispute had expanded to affect every aspect of Ryan's life, his relationship, his career, his family relationships, his social standing. I hadn't sought this comprehensive unraveling. My goal had been simple and specific: fair repayment for significant financial support. But I had underestimated how thoroughly Ryan's self-created image would collapse once the foundation of lies was removed. The most unexpected fallout came a week later when Madison Prescott herself texted me, "Can we meet?" Just the two of us. I have questions only you can answer. My immediate instinct was to refuse. What could possibly be gained from a face-to-face meeting with the woman Ryan had left me for? But strategic thinking prevailed. Madison's perspective could provide valuable insight, perhaps even strengthen my position. And there was a part of me, a small, human part, that was simply curious. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe on the other side of the city, away from our usual haunts. When I arrived, Madison was already there, looking far less polished than in her social media photos. The designer clothes and perfect blowout had been replaced by jeans, a simple sweater, and hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "I know this is unconventional. What can I help you with, Madison?" She looked down at her coffee. "I need to know what really happened between you and Ryan." I thought Ryan would have told you his version. He has. Multiple versions, actually. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. That's part of the problem. I studied her carefully. She seemed genuinely distressed, nothing like the smug upgrade I had imagined. "What do you want to know?" I asked. "Did you really pay off his student loans?" "Yes. The final payment was made the morning of the day he left me." She flinched slightly. "And he knew you were making these payments?" "Of course. We discussed it regularly, tracked progress together. It was a deliberate plan we created as a couple." "He told me he paid them off himself," she said quietly. "Said it was through careful saving and bonuses from work." I wasn't surprised. Ryan is very invested in appearing self-sufficient. He also told me your relationship had been essentially over for months. That you were staying together out of habit, not love. I thought of the weekend trip we'd taken just 2 weeks before the breakup. The plans we'd made for apartment hunting. The future we'd discussed. That's not true, I said simply. We were actively planning our next steps together. Madison nodded slowly, as if confirming something she had already suspected. One last question. The demand for repayment, is it because of me? Are you trying to punish him for leaving you for someone else? The question was direct, almost brave in its frontal approach. I answered with equal directness. No. It's because I provided significant financial support based on the mutual understanding of a shared future. When that future was unilaterally terminated, regardless of who with or why, the financial arrangement needed to be addressed. She absorbed this, then nodded again. Thank you for being honest with me. As she stood to leave, I was struck by the realization that Madison, like me, had been navigating a reality partially of Ryan's creation. The villain I had constructed in my mind, a calculating social climber who had participated in Ryan's betrayal, didn't match the confused, questioning woman before me. Madison, I said as she gathered her things. For what it's worth, I don't think any of this is your fault. She smiled sadly. Maybe not. But I think I've been complicit in something I don't want to be part of. She hesitated. I'm sorry for what happened to you. You deserved better. After she left, I sat for a long time, processing the encounter. The fallout was expanding beyond what I had anticipated, affecting people I hadn't even considered in my original calculations. Was this what I wanted? The systematic dismantling of Ryan's carefully constructed life? The collateral damage to others caught in the aftermath? I reminded myself of my core goal: fair compensation for significant financial support provided under false pretenses. Everything else, the social consequences, the professional repercussions, the relationship fallout, those were natural results of Ryan's own actions coming to light. I hadn't sought comprehensive destruction. I had simply refused to be silenced, refused to accept the role of generous doormat that Ryan had assigned me. 2 days after my meeting with Madison, Marcus called. Ryan's lawyer reached out. They want to discuss settlement terms. The fallout had come full circle. From dismissal to defiance to defeat, Ryan's journey had been as predictable as it was necessary. What are they offering? I asked. $40,000 now, the remaining $25,000 in installments over 18 months. No formal admission of wrongdoing, but no denial either. It was less than the full amount I had requested, but more than I had realistically expected to recover. A reasonable compromise, a pragmatic resolution. I'll accept those terms, I decided. With one condition. What's that? I want the agreement to include a non-disparagement clause. Mutual silence about the details of our relationship and its dissolution. Marcus sounded surprised. You're protecting him? I'm protecting myself, I corrected, from having to revisit this chapter once it's closed. As I hung up, I realized the fallout had transformed me as well. 3 weeks ago, I had been devastated, betrayed, determined to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Now, I felt something unexpected, the quiet satisfaction of having stood my ground, coupled with the readiness to move forward. Ryan had said he needed someone with more. What he had discovered, in the most painful way possible, was that I had more than enough, more dignity, more integrity, more strength than he had ever given me credit for, and that, perhaps, was the most significant fallout of all. The settlement should have been the end. $40,000 immediately, the remaining $25,000 in monthly installments, a clean, legal resolution that allowed both of us to move forward with our lives. I should have known Ryan wouldn't go quietly. The first sign of his counteroffensive came 3 days after the agreement was signed. A mutual friend forwarded me a text from Ryan. Serena's going around telling people I used her financially, but the truth is more complicated. She offered that support to keep me dependent on her. When I finally broke free, she couldn't handle it and decided to punish me. I stared at the screen, a familiar cold clarity settling over me. Even now, even after everything, he was attempting to rewrite history, to position himself as the victim rather than the perpetrator. More messages followed, from different sources, but with the same central narrative. I was controlling, manipulative, using financial support as a way to maintain power in the relationship. Ryan was merely seeking independence, freedom from my suffocating influence. IT was a calculated strategy, not denying the financial support itself, which was now undeniable, but recasting its meaning and intent. A preemptive strike designed to undermine my credibility should I choose to speak publicly about what had happened. He's trying to control the narrative, Priya observed when I showed her the messages. Classic Darvo, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. It won't work, I said with more confidence than I felt. Too many people already know the truth. Don't underestimate the power of a well-crafted lie, she warned. Especially when it plays into existing stereotypes about women being manipulative or controlling. She was right. Already, I could see small fractures forming in the support network that had rallied around me. Questions where there had been certainty. Hesitation where there had been outrage. What are you going to do? Priya asked. I considered the options. I could counter publicly, sharing the evidence I had gathered, the texts, the financial records, the timeline. I could engage in the kind of social media war that would inevitably become messy and undignified. I could contact mutual friends individually to correct the false narrative. Or I could trust that the truth would ultimately prevail without my intervention. Nothing, I decided finally. The non-disparagement clause works both ways. If he's violating it, we document it for potential legal action. But I won't get dragged into a public battle of he said, she said. Are you sure that's wise? Priya looked concerned. People will believe what's easiest or what they hear first. People who matter will see through it, I said. And those who don't, they don't matter. My confidence was tested the following day when I received a call from my supervisor at work. Do you have a moment to talk, Serena? In private? The knot in my stomach tightened as I followed her to a conference room. Had Ryan's counter-narrative reached my professional circle? I received a concerning call yesterday, she began once we were seated. From a man named Bennett. He said he was your ex-partner. My blood ran cold. Ryan called you? What did he say? She looked uncomfortable. He implied that you might be going through some personal difficulties that could affect your work performance. Something about ongoing legal issues and financial disputes. He had crossed a line I hadn't even considered, attempting to undermine my professional standing, the one area of my life that had remained untouched by our conflict. Christine, I said carefully, Ryan and I recently ended our relationship. There's a financial settlement in progress, managed by attorneys on both sides. Nothing about this situation has or will affect my work performance. She studied me, then nodded. That's what I suspected. Your work has been exemplary, especially these past few weeks. She hesitated. I want you to know that I shut down the conversation as soon as I realized what he was trying to do. It was inappropriate and unprofessional. Relief washed over me. Thank you. If he contacts anyone else in the company, please let me know immediately. She stood, signaling the end of our conversation. And Serena? Whatever's happening in your personal life, you're handling it with remarkable composure. I left the conference room shaken but resolute. Ryan's counterattack had escalated from social manipulation to attempting professional sabotage. The desperation of this move revealed how thoroughly he was unraveling. That evening, I called Marcus to update him on this new development. His response was immediate and unequivocal. This is a clear violation of the non-disparagement clause. Contacting your employer crosses multiple boundaries. We need to respond firmly. What do you suggest? A formal cease and desist letter with specific mention of his contact with your employer. And we should reference potential pursuit of further legal remedies if the behavior continues. Do it, I authorized. Ryan's counter-narrative was spreading through our social circle like a virus, mutating slightly with each retelling, but maintaining the same central premise. I was the manipulator, he the victim. Each new message forwarded to me revealed another iteration of his revised history. The most painful came from Miguel, who had initially been so supportive. I heard Ryan's side of things, and man, it's complicated. Sounds like there was toxicity on both sides. Maybe this whole money thing isn't as black and white as it seemed. I didn't respond, didn't attempt to correct or defend. Either Miguel trusted my character and integrity, or he didn't. No argument I could make would be more convincing than the person I had consistently shown myself to be over years of friendship. The next phase of Ryan's counterattack came from an unexpected quarter. Scrolling through social media one evening, I encountered a post from Madison, a carefully worded statement about complicated relationships and hearing all perspectives before judgment. It was diplomatic, names deliberately omitted, but the implication was clear. She was revising her own assessment of the situation, moving away from the clarity she had expressed during our cafe meeting. Ryan had gotten to her, convinced her to at least partially align with his version of events. Perhaps he had leveraged her family connections, her father's position at Prescott Development, her role in his professional advancement. Or perhaps he had simply worn her down with the persistent presentation of his altered reality. Whatever the reason, Madison's post was a strategic blow. Third-party validation of Ryan's counter-narrative from someone who had initially questioned him. The most twisted aspect of Ryan's counterattack was his attempt to position himself as the responsible financial party. Zoe called to warn me one evening, her voice tight with anger. "You won't believe what Ryan's telling people now. He's saying the reason he had so much debt in the first place was because he was helping you financially during your first year together, and those initial sacrifices put him behind on his own payments." The absurdity of this claim, directly contradicted by financial records, by the reality of our early relationship, was breathtaking in its audacity. "That's categorically false," I said. "I was financially stable when we met. He was the one with massive student debt from his graduate program." "I know that," Zoe assured me. "Mom and Dad know it too. They remember his constant stress about those loan payments before you came into the picture." She paused. "But people who didn't know you back then? They might believe it." Ryan's counterattack was comprehensive, targeting multiple fronts simultaneously: social, professional, narrative. It was the desperate flailing of someone whose carefully constructed image was disintegrating, who would say or do almost anything to salvage some semblance of control. The cease and desist letter from Marcus had an immediate effect on one front. Ryan stopped contacting my workplace. But his social campaign continued, growing increasingly elaborate as he added details and context to support his revised history. I maintained my strategic silence, documenting each violation of the non-disparagement clause, but reserving judgment on when to take further legal action. This restraint was not passivity, it was calculation. Each uncontested message, each unanswered accusation was another length of rope Ryan was using to hang himself. The turning point came unexpectedly through a source I had not anticipated: Eleanor Bennett. "Serena," she said when I answered her call, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "I need to speak with you about Ryan." "What about him?" "He's been saying things about your relationship, about the financial arrangements between you. Things that don't align with what his father and I observed over the years you were together." I remained silent, letting her continue. "We've been reviewing our own financial records," she went on. "The times Ryan asked us for help with his loan payments, which suddenly stopped after you two had been together about 6 months." She paused. "He told us then that he had found a better repayment plan. He never mentioned you were helping him." "I see," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I've spoken with several people who have received narratives from Ryan about your relationship. The inconsistencies are troubling. Very troubling." "What are you asking me, Eleanor?" She sighed deeply. "Nothing. I'm not asking anything. I'm telling you that his father and I have made it clear to Ryan that we will not support or enable what he's doing. If he continues this campaign against you, he will do it without our backing." It was a line in the sand from the people whose opinion Ryan valued most, his parents. The implicit threat was clear: continue this counterattack and lose your family's support entirely. "Thank you for telling me," I said simply. "It's the right thing to do," she replied. "And Serena? I'm truly sorry for what happened. You deserved better from my son." The next day, Marcus called with news. Ryan's lawyer reached out again. They want to amend the settlement agreement. They're now offering the full $65,000 upfront in exchange for a comprehensive confidentiality agreement from both parties. He wants to buy my silence, I realized. Essentially, yes. And he's willing to pay a premium for it. I considered the offer. The full amount, paid immediately, would allow me to rebuild my savings and move forward financially. The confidentiality agreement would legally prevent Ryan from continuing his counter-narrative campaign. It was, on paper, a victory. The complete financial recovery I had sought, plus the added benefit of shutting down Ryan's increasingly desperate attempts to rewrite our history, yet something about it felt hollow. What would this confidentiality agreement prevent me from discussing, exactly? I asked. Essentially all aspects of your financial arrangements during the relationship, the circumstances of its end, and the settlement itself. And if I encounter people who have already heard Ryan's version, I wouldn't be able to correct the record. That's correct. The agreement would be quite comprehensive. I thought about the implications, not just for me, but for others who might encounter Ryan in the future. My silence would not just be about our specific conflict, it would erase the pattern of behavior that others deserve to be warned about. I'll counter, I decided. Full payment up front, yes. Mutual non-disparagement, yes. But no comprehensive confidentiality. I retain the right to speak factually about what occurred if directly asked. He won't like that, Marcus warned. Those are my terms. Ryan's counterattack had revealed something crucial. Despite the financial settlement, the narrative, who controlled it, who defined it, who believed it, mattered deeply to him. Perhaps even more than the money itself. Which meant that retaining my right to speak the truth, plainly and factually when necessary, was not just a personal preference. It was leverage. Power. A check against future manipulations. 2 days later, Marcus called back. They've accepted your terms, with one minor modification. The non-disparagement clause extends to statements about Madison Prescott as well. I smiled slightly. Of course. Ryan was protecting his current relationship, perhaps at Madison's insistence. Accepted, I agreed. Ryan's counterattack had failed on all fronts. His attempts to reframe our relationship had convinced only those already inclined to believe the worst of me. His professional sabotage had been shut down almost immediately. His elaborate alternative history had crumbled under the weight of inconsistencies and contradictions. Most significantly, his desperate flailing had cost him something far more valuable than money: credibility. With each new version of events, each embellishment, each attack on my character, he had revealed himself not as the confident, successful professional he portrayed, but as someone willing to lie, manipulate, and harm others to protect his own interests. The final payment arrived in my account on a Tuesday morning. $65,000, transferred without comment or acknowledgement. No apology, no acceptance of responsibility, just the cold transaction of debt repaid. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt like closing a door on a room I never wanted to enter again, necessary, definitive, but tinged with the sadness of wasted years and misplaced trust. Ryan's counterattack had been the desperate move of someone who believed that enough money, charm, and carefully crafted narratives could rewrite reality. What he failed to understand was that some realities cannot be rewritten. They can only be acknowledged and addressed, or denied at increasing cost to one's integrity. I had chosen acknowledgement, straightforward and unembellished. Ryan had chosen denial, elaborate and ultimately self-defeating. In the end, the most powerful response to his counterattack hadn't been matching tactics or escalating warfare. It had been the steady, unwavering commitment to truth, not as a weapon, but as a foundation on which to rebuild. The settlement payment appeared in my account on a Tuesday morning, a simple bank transfer with no accompanying message. $65,000, the agreed-upon amount, delivered as scheduled. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a financial obligation fulfilled. I stared at the screen for a long moment, the numbers blurring slightly as I contemplated what they represented. Not just money, but 3 years of support, trust, and belief in a shared future that had never truly existed. The transaction felt simultaneously like victory and loss, the recovery of what was rightfully mine coupled with the final confirmation that everything I had believed about my relationship with Ryan had been an illusion. I took a screenshot, sent it to Priya with a simple message. It's done. Her response came immediately. Drinks tonight. We're celebrating. But was this something to celebrate? The question lingered as I moved through my workday, responding to emails and participating in meetings with a focus that had become my emotional armor over the past weeks. Certainly, the financial recovery was significant, money that would allow me to rebuild my savings, perhaps even make a down payment on a small condo of my own. Yet the circumstances of its return left a bitter aftertaste. That evening at Priya's favorite wine bar, she raised her glass in a decisive toast. To getting what you deserve. I clinked my glass against hers, smiling despite my conflicted feelings. To standing my ground. How does it feel? She asked, studying me over the rim of her glass. Having it resolved? Complicated, I admitted. I'm relieved, obviously. But also, I don't know. Sad, maybe? Not about Ryan, I added quickly, seeing her expression shift. About the time. 3 years invested in someone who could walk away so easily. Priya nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. The money is back. The time isn't. That's the hardest part. Exactly. But, she continued, leaning forward slightly, consider what you gained. Not just the financial recovery, but the knowledge that you can advocate for yourself. That you won't be taken advantage of without consequence. She was right, of course. Beyond the money itself, I had discovered a strength I hadn't previously recognized, the ability to remain focused and strategic in the face of betrayal, to pursue justice without descending into vindictiveness, to maintain dignity when dignity was what Ryan had tried to strip from me. To unexpected lessons I amended, raising my glass again. The resolution extended beyond the financial settlement. In the days that followed, I received a series of text messages from mutual friends who had initially been swayed by Ryan's counter-narrative. From Miguel, I'm sorry I doubted you. After talking with others who've known you both for years, I realize I should have trusted your character over his stories. From Jen, a colleague who had attended our dinner parties, just heard what really happened with you and Ryan. That's beyond messed up. I'm here if you need anything. Even from people I had considered primarily Ryan's friends. I want you to know that most of us see through what he tried to do. Not cool. Not cool at all. These messages, tentative olive branches, attempts at reconciliation, expressions of belated support, felt like the gradual restoration of a social ecosystem that Ryan's betrayal had disrupted. I responded to each with graciousness rather than resentment, recognizing that everyone navigates complicated social allegiances as best they can. The most unexpected resolution came in the form of a handwritten letter from Eleanor Bennett. Dear Serena, it began, the elegant script a reminder of the formal thank you notes she had always sent after holiday dinners. I write to express my deep regret for what you experienced with Ryan. While a mother never stops loving her child, she can acknowledge when that child has behaved in ways that are unworthy of the values we tried to instill. The letter continued, detailing her own journey of recognition, how she had initially struggled to reconcile the son she thought she knew with the person revealed through his actions and subsequent behavior. How she and Ryan's father had ultimately confronted him about the financial deception, the manipulation, the damage he had inflicted. We have insisted that Ryan seek professional help to address the patterns that led to these choices. Whether he follows through is, of course, his decision. But please know that his father and I stand firmly on the side of accountability, even when that accountability must be directed at our own son. She concluded with a sentiment that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. You were always the kind of partner we had hoped Ryan would find, intelligent, supportive, principled. The fact that he failed to recognize and honor these qualities reflects his limitations, not yours. I hope you find someone worthy of all you have to offer. I sat with the letter for a long time, absorbing the weight of Eleanor's words. There was resolution in this unexpected alliance, the acknowledgement from Ryan's own family that what had happened was wrong, that the failure belonged to him rather than me. 3 weeks after the settlement payment, another form of resolution arrived via a brief email from Marcus. Ryan has accepted a position with an architectural firm in Seattle. Effective next month. Physical distance, the simplest and sometimes most effective form of resolution. Ryan was removing himself from our shared geography, perhaps recognizing that rebuilding his professional and social standing would be easier in a place where our history wasn't common knowledge. I felt a weight lift at this news. The possibility of awkward encounters, of having to navigate spaces we had once shared, had been a lingering anxiety. With Ryan's relocation, that anxiety dissolved, replaced by a sense of definitive closure. "Are you relieved?" Priya asked when I shared the news. "More than I expected to be," I admitted. "It feels like the final piece falling into place." The most meaningful resolution, however, came from within, the gradual shifting of my own narrative about what had happened and what it meant. In the immediate aftermath of Ryan's betrayal, I had framed the story primarily in terms of his actions. He had used me financially, he had planned his exit, he had moved on to someone who offered greater advantages. Over time, with distance and reflection, the narrative evolved. Not to minimize Ryan's responsibility, that remained clear and undiminished, but to reclaim my own agency within the story. Yes, Ryan had betrayed me. But I had also demonstrated remarkable resilience, strategic thinking, and self-advocacy. I had refused to accept the role of helpless victim that he had assigned me. I had pursued justice with dignity and determination. This reframing wasn't about finding silver linings or forced optimism. It was about recognizing that while I couldn't control what had happened to me, I had absolute control over how I responded, and my response had revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. 6 weeks after the settlement, I found myself having dinner with Christine, my supervisor, who had become something of a mentor during this period. "I've been meaning to tell you," she said as we waited for dessert, "how impressed I've been with your handling of everything. Not just maintaining your professional performance, but your overall approach." "Thank you," I said, genuinely appreciative of her support. "It wasn't easy. The truly impressive achievements never are." She considered me thoughtfully. "You know, there's a senior marketing strategist position opening up next quarter. You should apply." I blinked in surprise. "That's a significant jump from my current role." "Yes, it is. But recent events have demonstrated that you possess exactly the qualities we look for at that level: strategic thinking, emotional intelligence, the ability to maintain focus under pressure." She smiled slightly. "Not to mention exceptional negotiation skills." The conversation shifted to other topics, but Christine's words lingered with me. The professional advancement she was suggesting represented another form of resolution, the transformation of a painful personal experience into fuel for growth and opportunity. Resolution, I was discovering, wasn't a single moment, but a process, a series of recalibrations, realizations, and reintegrations. With each passing week, the raw wound of betrayal became a scar, still visible, still part of me, but no longer painful to the touch. The final piece of personal resolution came on a quiet Saturday morning, 3 months after Ryan had walked out of Montello's restaurant and my life. I was browsing real estate listings, considering the possibility of purchasing my own place now that my savings had been restored. A photo caught my eye, a small but charming condo with a balcony overlooking a neighborhood park. Not luxurious or impressive by the standards Ryan now embraced, but warm, welcoming, mine. I sent the listing to Priya with a brief message. "What do you think?" Her response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Perfect. When can we tour it?" As I scheduled a viewing with the real estate agent, I realized I was smiling, a genuine, unforced smile born not of triumph over Ryan, but of anticipation for my own future. A future defined by my choices, my preferences, my values. Ryan had said he needed someone with more. In his mind, that had meant someone with more money, more connections, more status. What he had failed to recognize, what I now understood with complete clarity, was that I had always been someone with more. More integrity, more resilience, more courage, more capacity for genuine partnership. The resolution wasn't about proving this to Ryan. It was about fully recognizing it myself. That evening, as I walked through my apartment, the space that had once contained our shared life, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for months. The resolution wasn't perfect or complete. Life rarely offers such neat conclusions. But it was sufficient, substantial, real. Ryan was gone, moved to a different city to restart his life. The money he had taken under false pretenses had been returned. My professional path was expanding in unexpected ways. My understanding of myself, My strengths, my boundaries, my worth had deepened immeasurably. I had asked for what was rightfully mine, and I had received it, not just financially, but in the form of self-knowledge, authentic relationships, and the freedom to move forward without the weight of unaddressed injustice. That, I realized, was the true resolution, not the settlement amount in my bank account, but the settled certainty in my heart that I had emerged from this experience not diminished, but expanded, not defined by what had been done to me, but by how I had responded. Ryan had taken much from me. But what remained, what had always been mine, was more than enough. 1 year after Ryan walked out of Montello's restaurant, leaving me with the bill and the devastating awareness that he had used me financially for years, I stood in the kitchen of my new condo, unpacking the last of my dishes. Sunlight streamed through windows that overlooked a small park where neighborhood children played. The space was modest but entirely mine, purchased with my own money, decorated according to my own taste, free from the echoes of betrayal that had lingered in my old apartment. I placed the final mug on the shelf, a housewarming gift from Priya with "Worth It" written in bold letters, and stepped back to survey my new home. Clean lines, warm colors, books stacked on shelves that I had built myself during a weekend workshop. Nothing extravagant, nothing chosen to impress others, everything selected with intention and authenticity. The promotion Christine had encouraged me to pursue had come through 4 months earlier, bringing not just increased responsibility and compensation, but a deeper confidence in my professional path. I was leading a team now, guiding marketing strategies for clients who valued my insights and approach. Financially, I had not just recovered but advanced. The settlement from Ryan, combined with my increased salary, had allowed me to make a substantial down payment on this condo, rebuild my emergency fund, and begin investing for longer-term goals. The devastation I had felt upon discovering the depth of my financial entanglement with Ryan had been replaced by a new, more vigilant approach to money, not fearful or withholding, but clear-eyed and intentional. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. Priya stood on the threshold, a bottle of champagne in one hand, a small gift bag in the other. "Ready for your housewarming party?" she asked, stepping inside. "The others will be here in an hour, but I wanted to come early for the pre-celebration." I laughed, taking the champagne. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Absolutely. This calls for multiple celebrations." She surveyed the space appreciatively. "Look at this place. Look at you. 1 year ago, you were shell-shocked, trying to figure out how to recover from financial betrayal. Now you're the proud owner of prime real estate, killing it at work and hosting gatherings in your gorgeous home." "You make it sound easy," I said, smiling to soften the words. "Not easy," she corrected. "Just inevitable for someone like you. I never doubted you'd not just recover but thrive." As I uncorked the champagne and poured 2 glasses, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The pain gradually transformed into purpose, the betrayal into boundaries, the loss into learning. "Have you heard anything about Ryan recently?" Priya asked, accepting her glass. I shook my head. "Not directly. Zoe mentioned he's still in Seattle, working at that new firm. Apparently dating someone, though not Madison." "Madison dodged a bullet," Priya observed. "We both did," I replied, and it was true. The pain of Ryan's betrayal had been acute, the financial impact significant. But with time and distance, I had come to recognize it as a necessary rupture, the breaking of a bond that had been fundamentally imbalanced from the beginning. "To bullets dodged," Priya said, raising her glass. "And lessons learned." We clinked glasses, the crystals sound bright and clear in the sunlit kitchen. The lessons had indeed been numerous and profound. I had learned the importance of financial independence within relationships, the necessity of equal investment, not just monetarily but emotionally and practically. I had discovered my capacity for strategic thinking under duress, for maintaining dignity in the face of betrayal, for advocating for myself without compromising my integrity. Most significantly, I had learned to recognize and value my own worth, not as a function of what I could provide to others, but as an inherent quality that existed regardless of external validation. These lessons had shaped not just my approach to finances, but to relationships more broadly. 6 months after the settlement, I had begun dating again, cautiously at first, then with increasing openness. Not seeking a replacement for what I had lost with Ryan, but exploring the possibility of connection built on mutual respect and genuine reciprocity, Michael Chin had entered my life 3 months ago, introduced by a colleague at a professional conference. A software engineer with a quiet confidence and thoughtful perspective, he had initially interested me professionally. His insights on digital marketing integration were remarkable. But over coffee discussions that extended far beyond our initial business focus, I discovered a person whose approach to relationships aligned with my own evolving values. "Is Michael coming tonight?" Priya asked, seemingly tracking my thoughts. "Yes, around 7. He's bringing that dessert from the bakery you love." She grinned. I approve of this man more every day. What I appreciated most about Michael wasn't his thoughtfulness or his professional accomplishments, though both were considerable. It was the fundamental equality of our connection, the balanced give and take, the mutual support, the absence of power dynamics or hidden agendas. We were taking things slowly, both of us having emerged from previous relationships with valuable lessons and clear boundaries. But there was a solidity to our connection that felt entirely different from what I had experienced with Ryan, a foundation built on genuine seeing and being seen, rather than utility or advantaged. As guests began arriving for the housewarming party. Colleagues, neighbors, friends both old and new, I moved through my space with a sense of groundedness that would have been unimaginable a year ago. The wound of Ryan's betrayal had healed, leaving behind not weakness but wisdom. Late in the evening, as conversations flowed around my living room and kitchen, Michael found me near the balcony doors, momentarily taking in the view of the park now lit by street lamps. "Happy?" he asked, touching my elbow lightly. I considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Yes," I said finally. "Genuinely happy." He nodded, understanding that this wasn't a casual affirmation, but a significant recognition. We had shared enough of our histories to know the landmarks of each other's journeys. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. A housewarming gift. He handed me a small, unwrapped box. Inside was a key on a simple silver ring. "It's to my workshop space," he explained, seeing my questioning look. "For when you're ready to build those bookshelves for the guest room. All the tools you'll need are there." It was a perfect gift, not taking over the project I had mentioned wanting to tackle myself, but providing resources and support for my own creation. Not asserting control, but offering collaboration. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness behind the gesture. As the party continued around us, I was struck by how completely my life had transformed in the span of a year. Not just externally, the new home, the promotion, the budding relationship, but internally, in the way I understood myself and what I deserved. Ryan had said he needed someone with more, a statement that had initially devastated me, making me question my value and what I had to offer. Now I understood the profound irony of his assessment. He had sought external markers of status and advantage, Madison's family connections, her social standing, the doors she could open for his career. But in leaving me, he had walked away from something far more valuable, a partner who offered genuine support, integrity, and the kind of steadfast presence that creates true security. He had traded substance for surface, mistaking flash for worth. That realization no longer hurt. If anything, it filled me with a quiet compassion for Ryan, still chasing external validation, for the person I had been, unable to recognize my own value, for anyone caught in the confusion of measuring worth through acquisition rather than character. After the last guest had departed, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the quiet park. The journey from betrayal to this new beginning had not been linear or simple. There had been setbacks, moments of doubt, nights when the pain had felt fresh and overwhelming, but I had kept moving forward, one careful step at a time. Not rushing the process or forcing positive interpretations onto painful realities, but allowing myself to integrate the experience fully, the hurt, the anger, the eventual clarity and growth. The woman standing on this balcony was not the same person who had sat stunned in Montello's restaurant a year ago, watching her carefully constructed future disintegrate. She was stronger, wiser, more discerning. She recognized her worth not as something to be validated by others, but as an intrinsic quality that informed every choice and interaction. Ryan had said he needed someone with more. What I had discovered through the painful process of recovery and renewal was that I had always been that someone, not because of what I could provide financially or socially, but because of who I fundamentally was, and that knowledge, hard won, irreversible, empowering, was the true foundation of my new beginning.